Airports are busy, high-security places where every second matters. Yet some people still think the rules don't apply to them. On a bright morning, the chaos at the departure gate turned into pure madness when a woman known as a Karen decided her time was more important than everyone else's. Without hesitation, she pulled her shiny SUV right up to the departure gate curb, ignoring the flashing no parking signs, the yellow cones, and even the security officer's warnings. Passengers with suitcases had to squeeze past her car, while buses and shuttles honked non-stop, unable to pull up. She rolled down her window, waved her hand like she owned the place, and said she would be just a minute. But her minute dragged on as she got out of the car, strutted confidently into the terminal, and disappeared. That single act of selfishness started a chain of events that no one expected. The airport security didn't just let it slide. Within moments, a tow truck rumbled onto the scene, its engine growling as if it had been waiting for this moment. Crowds of travelers stopped rolling their bags and pulled out their phones, whispering with disbelief, "Are they really going to tow it right here?" Someone asked. The tow truck driver didn't waste time. With a loud metallic clang, the hook locked under her SUV, and in less than a minute, the entire car was tilted, lifted and crushed between the jaws of the truck's machine clamps. The sound of bending metal echoed across the bright sunlit departure area. Gasps and cheers mixed in the air. By the time Karen rushed back outside, it was already too late. Her perfect morning had turned into a public humiliation that no one present would ever forget. The morning sun spread across the airport like a floodlight, turning the glass walls of the terminal into gleaming mirrors that reflected streaks of blue sky and the constant shuffle of travelers. Rolling suitcases hummed against the pavement. Families huddled in tight groups with boarding passes in hand, and announcements from loudspeakers echoed above the chaos, reminding passengers of gate changes and security procedures. The departure area was a hive of motion, every second pulsing with the urgency of travel. Cars pulled into the designated drop-off zone one after another, each staying just long enough for hurried hugs and quick goodbyes. Taxi drivers shouted at passengers to hurry. Shuttle buses sighed as their air brakes released, and security officers kept the line moving, their gestures crisp and authoritative. Everything was orderly despite the madness until one vehicle broke the rhythm. It came without hesitation, a glossy black SUV with tinted windows that glided forward like it owned the place, while others paused, checked signs, and followed instructions. This car ignored them all. The driver steered boldly past yellow cones and flashing no parking warnings, cutting in front of a line of taxis that had been waiting patiently. Horns blared immediately, but the SUV didn't flinch. It slid right into the middle of the departure gate lane and stopped dead, blocking a shuttle bus that had been seconds away from unloading its passengers. Inside the SUV, the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She looked to be in her late 40s, wearing oversized sunglasses that covered half her face and a designer handbag slung carelessly over her shoulder. Her heels clicked confidently on the pavement, as if the space was her personal driveway. She didn't glance at the security guard waving frantically at her from down the lane, nor did she acknowledge the annoyed glares of travelers forced to maneuver their rolling bags around her parked car. She simply locked the vehicle with a sharp beep and began walking toward the glass doors of the terminal. "Ma'am, you can't park here," the nearest officer shouted, jogging a few steps toward her. She didn't even break stride. "I'll just be a minute," she called back, her voice ringing with the sharpness of someone used to giving orders, not receiving them. Then she disappeared into the stream of travelers entering the building, swallowed up by the glass doors and the clamor of boarding announcements. The officer stopped in his tracks. Frustration etched across his face. He tapped his radio, speaking quickly, while cars behind the SUV honked impatiently. The shuttle bus driver leaned on his horn for a long blast, his passengers stuck inside, their faces pressed to the windows in irritation. Luggage carts veered awkwardly around the obstruction, and parents pulling children by the hand cursed under their breath. In less than 5 minutes, the entire flow of the departure gate was disrupted. The airport prided itself on efficiency, on moving people in and out with precision. But one woman's disregard for rules had turned the system into chaos. Near the curb, 2 college students filming a vlog for their trip to Europe noticed the scene. One pulled out his phone, whispering, "Bro, are you seeing this? She just left her car there." His friend laughed, shaking his head. "This is gonna end badly. Watch." By now, the security officer's radio crackled with a firm response. "Tow enforcement inbound. Do not attempt to move the vehicle yourself." The officer nodded, his expression softening with relief. What it was about to be restored, but not quietly. Around the departure zone, conversations picked up. A businessman in a tailored suit muttered, "Some people think the world revolves around them," while a mother juggling 2 toddlers told her husband, "She's blocking everyone. If we miss our flight because of her." Her voice trailed off into frustrated silence. Time ticked on. 10 minutes became 15, yet the SUV remained gleaming smugly under the sunlight as though mocking everyone around it. The crowd's annoyance thickened into anticipation, their eyes darting between the abandoned vehicle and the officers pacing near the curb. Finally, the deep growl of a diesel engine cut through the air. Heads turned toward the far end of the lane where a massive tow truck appeared, its chrome bumper shining and its black hydraulic arms folded like the claws of a giant machine. It moved slowly, deliberately, its presence commanding the kind of silence that follows authority. Phones lifted instantly. Dozens of passengers paused mid-step, some abandoning their rush to film what they sensed was about to happen. Even the shuttle bus passengers, still trapped inside, leaned closer to their windows, their irritation melting into curiosity. The tow truck rolled closer, the hum of its engine vibrating against the pavement. The officer guided it with a wave, pointing directly at the black SUV. The truck pulled up alongside, its driver a broad-shouldered man in a neon vest eyeing the obstacle with a mixture of irritation and amusement. He killed the engine and stepped down, his boots striking the concrete with a heavy thud. The driver surveyed the vehicle, running a practiced eye over the blocked lane, the jammed traffic, the flashing signs. Then, with a shake of his head, he muttered, "People never learn." The crowd edged closer. Murmurs rippled through the onlookers, mixing with the faint chatter of loudspeaker announcements echoing from the terminal entrance. The students recording the event whispered with excitement. The businessman set down his briefcase just long enough to capture a picture. Even the mother with 2 toddlers paused, her annoyance turning into something like satisfaction. The SUV, still gleaming and proud in the sun, sat oblivious to its fate. Inside the terminal, Karen was likely browsing the check-in counter or complaining to an airline employee about her ticket, completely unaware of the storm gathering outside. The tow truck driver climbed back into his cab, revved the engine once, and began maneuvering into position. The hydraulics whined faintly as the arms shifted, lowering toward the pavement. Metal clinked against metal, the sound sharp enough to slice through the din of the airport crowd. The security officer folded his arms and stepped back, leaving the process entirely to the tow enforcement team. The crowd fell into a hush, every eye fixed on the black SUV. It was a moment suspended in time, the calm before something unforgettable. And in that bright, ordinary morning, as the sun cast sharp shadows across the pavement and the glass of the terminal reflected the approaching machine, the first chapter of Karen's public humiliation was about to unfold. The diesel engine rumbled like a restless animal as the tow truck driver slid his machine into perfect alignment with the black SUV. He leaned out his open window, scanning the clearance around him, then gave a short nod of approval. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he shifted the gear, and the truck's hydraulic arms hissed into motion, lowering with deliberate precision. The metal clamps screeched against the pavement, sharp enough to make some of the onlookers wince. The crowd edged closer, careful not to block traffic but too curious to walk away. Travelers who had been rushing inside stopped to join the circle forming near the curb. Phones were held high, recording every angle, as if the whole departure gate had turned into an impromptu theater stage and the SUV was the main act. The businessman with his polished shoes crossed his arms, whispering to a stranger beside him. She thought the rules didn't apply. Now she learned. The tow truck driver, unfazed by the attention, hopped down from the cab. His boots echoed against the concrete as he crouched low, sliding a heavy steel hook beneath the front axle of the SUV. He grunted as he tightened the chain, every movement precise, efficient, and unhurried. The sun caught the edge of his neon vest, flashing brightly as he stood and tapped the chain twice with a gloved hand to test its hold. Satisfied, he waved to the officer standing a few feet away. The officer raised his radio. "Vehicle secured," he said firmly, his voice crisp over the static. "Proceed." The driver climbed back into the tow truck and pulled the lever. Instantly, the hydraulics screamed louder, the steel arms snapping shut with a metallic clang. The SUV jerked violently, its tires squealing against the concrete as it lifted. The crowd gasped collectively, some covering their mouths while others cheered. The sound of twisting bolts and groaning suspension filled the air. It wasn't just a car being moved, it was being manhandled by a machine built for dominance. The SUV tilted upward, its glossy hood rising like a stubborn child being dragged out of a classroom. A loud crack echoed as one of the undercarriage panels scraped against the pavement. The truck's clamps tightened again, squeezing metal against metal until the sound of crunching steel pierced the air. Someone in the crowd whistled. Another voice shouted, "About time." The shuttle bus driver, finally freed from waiting, leaned on his horn in approval, flashing a grin at the scene. His passengers laughed, some applauding as though the whole thing had been orchestrated for their entertainment. Inside the terminal, passengers rushing through the glass doors turned their heads at the commotion, curiosity drawing them outside. Soon, more people pressed against the glass walls, pointing and whispering as the SUV's punishment unfolded in broad daylight. The SUV groaned under the force, its suspension sagging as the front wheels dangled helplessly above the ground. The tow truck driver eased forward slightly, dragging the car a few feet, its tires screeching like chalk against a board. The grinding echoed across the lane, bouncing off the terminal walls and hanging in the air like a warning. The crowd grew louder, their excitement feeding off each other. A young woman with a stroller chuckled under her breath, but she thought she was too important to follow the rules. Her friend replied, shaking her head, "Well, now her car's going on YouTube," as if on cue. The two college students who had been filming earlier spoke to their cameras, narrating dramatically, "Day 2 of our trip, and we're witnessing live justice at the airport. This Karen parked at the departure gate. Look at this, guys. Her car's getting wrecked." The SUV shifted again as the hydraulics tightened further, this time denting its bumper inward. The sound of crunching plastic snapped through the air, sharp and final. Gasps shot through the crowd. Some cringed, others clapped, but no one turned away. Then came the voice, high-pitched, panicked, and unmistakably furious. "Stop. That's my car." Heads whipped toward the terminal doors. Bursting through them was Karen, her sunglasses now perched on her head, her face red from exertion and disbelief. She stormed forward, her heels clacking like gunshots on the pavement. Her designer bag bounced against her hip as she pointed wildly toward the SUV, her mouth open in outrage. The crowd's energy shifted instantly. Murmurs turned into laughter, phones turned toward her, and people whispered eagerly as though they'd been waiting for her entrance all along. "Of course she's back now," someone muttered. Karen marched directly to the officer first, her finger stabbing the air. "You can't do this. That's illegal. I was gone for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. The officer remained calm, folding his hands behind his back. "Ma'am, this is a no parking zone. Your vehicle is obstructing shuttle and taxi services. You were warned." "I told him I'd be a minute," Karen shrieked, her voice echoing across the departure lane. She swung her arm toward the tow truck driver, who was calmly adjusting the hydraulic controls. "And you, put it down this instant. You're scratching my paint. Do you have any idea how much this car costs?" Her outrage only fueled the crowd. Laughter rippled through the onlookers. Someone called out, "Guess it costs less now," and the group erupted into chuckles. Even the shuttle bus passengers, still stuck waiting, pounded lightly on their windows, cheering the tow truck driver on. Karen's face twisted in fury. She turned in a circle, trying to shame the crowd into supporting her, but all she saw were phones pointed at her, capturing every ounce of her meltdown. She covered her face for a moment, then pointed again at the officer. "This is harassment. I'll sue the airport. I'll sue the city. I'll sue all of you." The officer didn't flinch. "Ma'am, please step aside. The process is already underway." "No. You can't do this," she screamed, running toward the SUV. She placed her hands against the hood as though her small frame could fight against the machine that was already lifting it higher. Her heels slipped slightly on the pavement, but she steadied herself, glaring at the driver. "You stop this truck right now, or I swear you'll regret it." The tow truck driver leaned out of his cab.com and "Lady, you're the one who's gonna regret it." He pulled the lever again, and the SUV lurched upward another foot. The hood tilted, throwing Karen off balance so that she stumbled backward, nearly falling. The crowd roared with laughter, some clapping, some recording every second. Karen's humiliation was now complete, caught between her pride, her anger, and a machine that refused to bend to her will. The SUV hung suspended, its front crushed against the clamps, its bumper twisted like a crumpled sheet of foil. Karen screamed again, her voice shrill, but the truck's engine drowned her out, and under the bright sun, as shadows stretched across the concrete and the crowd's excitement swelled, the stage was set for a confrontation that would leave her completely broken. Not just her car, but her ego too. The moment hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The SUV dangled helplessly in the clamps of the tow truck, its glossy black paint reflecting the midday sun. Every dent, every scrape, every groan of metal against the hydraulics was amplified by the wide-open space of the departure gate. The crowd was buzzing now, half cheering, half waiting for the inevitable climax, as though they were watching a live-action drama unfold in front of them. Karen stood in the middle of it all, red-faced, her hair disheveled from rushing back through the terminal. Her sunglasses were clutched in one hand, her designer bag slipping dangerously off her shoulder. She looked less like the confident woman who had strutted out of her SUV earlier and more like someone on the edge of a public breakdown. "I said put it down," she screamed at the tow truck driver, stamping her heel so hard it echoed on the concrete. But the driver didn't flinch. He leaned forward in his cab, eyes steady on his controls, his gloved hands resting calmly on the levers. With a smooth motion, he pulled one downward. The hydraulics hissed like a serpent, and the SUV's body creaked as the clamps tightened even more. The sound was brutal, steel grinding against steel, glass rattling in its frame. The crowd gasped, then erupted into a chorus of shouts. Some people clapped, others laughed, and more phones were lifted to capture every angle of the destruction. A man near the curb muttered to his wife. She brought this on herself, while the college students narrating for their vlog spoke into their camera with pure excitement. "This is it. Guys, the car's not surviving this." Karen's eyes went wide as she heard the metallic groan deepen. She rushed forward again, placing her hands flat against the driver's door of her SUV as if she could push back against the inevitable. Her palms slid uselessly over the glossy paint. "Stop, this is worth more than your entire salary," she shrieked. The driver rolled down his window, his expression calm and steady. "Lady, your car's worth less than the headache you've caused today." And with that, he pulled another lever. The SUV jolted violently as its front bumper bent inward with a deafening crunch. Plastic shattered, falling in jagged pieces to the pavement. The hood caved slightly under the pressure, warping like paper under a strong hand. Karen screamed, a raw, shrill sound that made heads turn from as far as the taxi stand. The officer standing nearby raised his voice above the chaos. "Ma'am, step back for your own safety." But Karen wasn't listening. She pounded her fists against the SUV, her voice cracking with rage and desperation. "You can't do this. This is my car. I'll have your job. All of you will regret this." Her words, instead of intimidating, only fueled the crowd. A ripple of laughter spread through the onlookers. A woman holding her phone whispered gleefully, "Oh, this is going viral tonight." Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The tow truck's hydraulics released a louder hiss, and the SUV lifted higher, tilting so that the back wheels scraped harshly against the concrete before finally leaving the ground. The clamps tightened around the undercarriage with a thunderous crack, the sound echoing off the terminal walls. The SUV dangled now, completely at the mercy of the machine. Its front end was crushed against the clamps, the hood bent in half, the bumper hanging like a broken jaw. Fluids dripped slowly onto the pavement, glistening in the sun. Karen collapsed to her knees, clutching her hair with both hands. Tears welled in her eyes, streaking her mascara as she screamed into the open air, "You've destroyed it. You've destroyed my car." The tow truck driver remained calm, his eyes fixed on his task. He maneuvered the truck slightly forward, the SUV swaying in the air, its broken pieces rattling like loose bones. Each movement drew cheers from the crowd, who now treated the scene as a performance, a form of live justice they'd been craving all morning. One man shouted, "That's what happens when you think you're above the rules," and the crowd erupted in applause. Karen's rage only grew. She scrambled back to her feet, pointing wildly at everyone around her. "You're all enjoying this. You're all laughing at me. Pathetic, every single one of you. Do you know who I am? I'll make sure none of you ever." But her rant was drowned out by another screech of metal as the SUV's rear axle gave way with a loud snap. The clamps squeezed harder, crushing the vehicle's frame until the sound of breaking glass filled the air. The back window shattered, raining fragments onto the pavement in sparkling bursts that glittered in the sunlight. The crowd gasped, then cheered again. Phones captured the shards scattering across the ground like confetti at a celebration. Karen staggered backward, shielding her face with her arms as though the broken glass might sting her. Her knees buckled slightly, and for the first time, her voice trembled not with rage, but with shock. "No, no, this can't be happening." But it was happening, and nothing she could do would stop it. The tow truck's engine roared louder, gears grinding as the machine secured the ruined SUV firmly against its steel arms. What had once been a shiny, proud vehicle was now twisted, bent, and dripping fluids onto the pavement. The perfect picture of wealth and arrogance had been reduced to rubble in the span of minutes. Karen stood frozen, staring at the wreckage, her face pale beneath the streaks of smeared makeup. Her chest heaved as though she was struggling to breathe, every ounce of her pride crumbling in front of the watching crowd. The officer finally stepped closer, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, you were given clear instructions. This area is a no-parking zone. Your actions disrupted airport operations and put others at risk. This is the consequence." Karen spun toward him, her voice hoarse. "You don't understand. I had to park there. I was in a hurry. I had no choice." The officer shook his head. "Everyone here is in a hurry. You chose to ignore the rules." The truth of his words landed heavily. Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her throat bobbed, her fists clenched, but all she could manage was a strangled sob. Behind her, the crowd began to disperse, satisfied that justice had been served. Some lingered to capture final photos of the wrecked SUV dangling from the tow truck, while others walked away still laughing, already retelling the story to their companions. Karen stood alone now, humiliated, her car destroyed, her ego shattered. She watched helplessly as the tow truck driver climbed out one last time, tightened the chains with a sharp pull, and climbed back into his cab. The engine roared again, the truck rolling forward slowly, dragging the mangled SUV with it. The sound of the crushed frame scraping against steel echoed one last time across the departure gate. Karen screamed again, but her voice was drowned out completely by the machine, and under the bright sunlight of that ordinary day, the symbol of her entitlement was hauled away in ruins, leaving behind only broken glass, twisted metal, and the silence of a woman who had finally realized she was not untouchable. The departure gate slowly began to settle back into its usual rhythm, but the traces of chaos still lingered. The crowd that had been buzzing minutes ago was now dispersing. Many passengers still chuckling and replaying the videos they had just recorded. Shards of glass sparkled on the pavement like forgotten confetti, and the faint smell of leaking fluids hung in the warm air. The shuttle bus finally pulled up to the curb, unloading passengers who looked both annoyed and entertained when they heard fragments of what had happened. Karen, however, was frozen in place. Her SUV, her pride, her symbol of power was gone, dragged down the lane in humiliating pieces. She stood in the middle of the curb, trembling with rage, her hair messy and makeup streaked from tears. Her designer bag dangled limply from her arm, almost forgotten. Around her, whispers still floated, soft enough to sting. That's what she gets. People like her ruin it for everyone. Did you see her face? Priceless. Karen's chest heaved as she spun in circles, glaring at strangers who dared to laugh. Delete those videos, she screamed suddenly, pointing at random people holding their phones. You can't record me. That's illegal. A group of teenagers giggled, clearly ignoring her, one of them waving their phone mockingly in her direction. A businessman shook his head and walked away. Every attempt she made to regain control only deepened her humiliation. The officer from earlier stepped closer again, his expression calm but firm, his voice carrying authority that cut through her chaos. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside and calm down. You are creating a disturbance. Karen snapped her head toward him, her voice sharp. Disturbance? Do you know what just happened? They destroyed my car. That was destruction of property. That was theft. I'm calling my lawyer right now. She fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking, her breaths uneven. The officer didn't move. You were warned not to park in that zone. The tow truck was authorized. This is standard procedure. Karen's laugh came out brittle, high-pitched, almost manic. Standard procedure. Crushing a luxury vehicle like it's a soda can is standard procedure. She waved her phone wildly as though it were a weapon. My attorney will have all your jobs before sunset. Behind her, more laughter rippled through the onlookers who had lingered to see the drama unfold. The two college students filming their vlog kept narrating softly, trying not to laugh too loudly as their camera caught every second of Karen's meltdown. She's threatening to sue everyone, one whispered. This is gold. Karen's voice grew louder, shaking with desperation. You people don't understand. That car was special imported, customized, worth more than your pathetic paychecks. Do you think you can humiliate me like this? I'll make sure the news covers this. I'll make sure everyone here regrets laughing at me. The officer finally took a step forward, holding up a hand. His tone was calm but no longer patient. Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time, step aside and calm down. If you continue this behavior, you will be detained for disorderly conduct. That stopped her for a moment. Her mouth opened, then closed again. The color drained slightly from her face. Being publicly humiliated was one thing, but being arrested at an airport, dragged off in handcuffs in front of all these people, was another entirely. She straightened her back, trying to mask the tremble in her voice. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. The officer's eyes didn't waver. Try me. For several long seconds, silence stretched between them. The crowd hushed slightly, waiting to see if the woman who had been so loud and arrogant would actually push the officer too far. Karen's lips quivered, her eyes darted toward the terminal doors. And finally she took a small step back. Her phone buzzed in her hand, startling her. She glanced at it, then quickly pressed it to her ear, her voice dropping into a frantic whisper as she walked a few steps away. Yes, hello. I need legal representation immediately. They've stolen my car. They've crushed it here at the airport, at the departure gate. No, I don't care how busy you are. I need someone here now. Her desperate voice carried easily and people nearby snickered openly. One man muttered, she's still trying to dig her way out. Another replied, she never admits she was wrong. Meanwhile, the officer sighed, speaking into his radio again. Tow complete. Crowd dispersing. Subject agitated but under control. Karen paced in small circles as she continued to argue on the phone, her words blending between anger and pleading. It's not my fault I had to park there. I had no choice. They didn't even give me a warning. Well, maybe one, but it doesn't matter. They targeted me because I'm a woman, because they're jealous of me. Don't laugh. I'm serious. The more she spoke, the more ridiculous she sounded. Passengers passing by no longer saw a powerful woman. They saw someone unraveling in real time, her entitlement crumbling under the weight of her own excuses. Eventually, she snapped her phone shut with a frustrated growl, realizing no immediate help was coming. She turned back toward the officer, her voice quieter but no less sharp. Fine, you've had your fun, but don't think this is the end. You'll see me again. Every single one of you will regret this. The officer didn't respond. He simply gave a short nod toward the terminal. Silently urging her to move along, Karen hesitated, her body stiff with pride, then finally adjusted her handbag, smoothed her hair with trembling fingers, and marched back into the building. Her heels clicked angrily with each step, echoing across the now cleared curbside. As she disappeared through the glass doors, the officer exhaled slowly, shaking his head. A faint smile tugged at his lips as he turned to help direct the next shuttle bus into place. Life at the departure gate returned to normal, at least for everyone except the woman who had just suffered the most public humiliation of her life. Inside, Karen stormed toward the check-in counters, her mind racing. She could still salvage this, she told herself. She would file complaints. She would call her lawyer again. She would demand compensation. She had always gotten her way before. Why should today be any different? But deep down, beneath her anger, annoying unease had begun to grow. For the first time in years, she had been powerless. Her words, her threats, her money, none of it had mattered when a tow truck's steel claws closed around her car. None of it had stopped the laughter, the cameras, the way people looked at her, not with fear, but with pity and contempt. She clenched her fists, forcing the thought away. She wasn't beaten. Not yet, at least. That's what she told herself as she marched through the terminal, carrying her humiliation like a shadow that refused to leave. And outside, under the blazing midday sun, the broken pieces of her shattered bumper still lay scattered on the pavement, a reminder to everyone passing through that no one, not even a self-proclaimed queen of entitlement, was above the rules. The sun was still blazing over the airport, casting long shadows across the busy departure lanes. The sound of rolling luggage wheels, car engines, and the occasional honk blended into a restless hum. But amid the normal rhythm of travel, there was one sight no one could forget: the crushed remains of Karen's once proud SUV, strapped tightly to the back of the airport's tow truck like a defeated trophy. Travelers whispered as they passed, replaying the scene of her public humiliation in hushed tones, while others proudly showed their recordings on their phones, grinning at their own commentary layered over the video. It was already spreading through social media faster than wildfire. Karen, meanwhile, was left behind in the chaos, her face pale, her voice hoarse from screaming. For the first time that morning, she wasn't commanding attention out of arrogance but out of pity. She had stormed out of the terminal too late, expecting to wave her hands and have people obey her. But the airport didn't bend, not this time. The officers and the tow truck driver had done their job, and her car had paid the price. The dented hood, the shattered glass, and the twisted bumper now symbolized something bigger than just a broken vehicle. It symbolized the consequences of entitlement. People didn't rush to comfort her. Instead, they gave her space, and some even smirked as she stomped her feet in anger. "This is unacceptable," she shouted, pointing at the tow truck already halfway down the road. But her cries fell flat. No one was listening anymore. She was just another passenger now, stripped of her imaginary superiority. For once, the spotlight she craved so badly had turned into a harsh glare, exposing her selfishness for all to see. Security officers approached her calmly, their expressions professional but unyielding. "Ma'am, you need to step aside and stop blocking traffic," one of them said firmly. "If you want to file a complaint, you can head to the airport administration office inside." His tone wasn't rude, but it was final. There was no room for negotiation. Karen sputtered, her lips trembling as she searched for words, but none came. She had never been told no so bluntly before, and it stung more than the sight of her crushed SUV rolling away. Reluctantly, she turned and staggered back inside the terminal. Her heels clicked angrily against the polished floor, but this time no one turned to admire her. Instead, people stepped aside with wary glances, murmuring to each other about the crazy woman at the gate. Every corner she walked past carried echoes of laughter and whispers, as though the building itself was alive with her embarrassment. Meanwhile, outside, life returned to normal. Shuttle buses pulled up without obstruction. Taxis unloaded families without delay, and the departure gate breathed freely again. The tow truck driver, now heading to the impound lot, shook his head with a faint smile. He'd seen plenty of entitled people before, but this one would stay in his memory, not because she was unique, but because of how spectacularly her arrogance had backfired. Inside, Karen sat on a bench, staring blankly at the departure board. Her flight was long gone. She had been so focused on herself, so determined to bend the world to her will, that she had sabotaged her own trip. Now she was stranded, furious and humiliated. Passengers around her avoided eye contact, not out of sympathy but because they didn't want to be dragged into her drama. For once, her presence wasn't commanding, it was isolating. Hours later, when she finally summoned the courage to visit the airport office, she was told the obvious truth. Her SUV had been impounded, and she would need to pay thousands in fines and damages if she wanted it back. Her jaw dropped as the official explained the list of violations: illegal parking in a restricted zone, obstruction of emergency access, ignoring security warnings, and endangering traffic flow. The words endangering traffic flow hit her like a slap. She had thought she was above the rules, but here she was, reduced to a case number on a violation report. Karen stormed out of the office, but her confidence was gone. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighed down by the eyes of strangers who had witnessed her downfall. The memory of metal crushing, glass shattering, and the crowd cheering haunted her ears. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about her pride. And pride, once shattered, was far harder to repair than steel. By late afternoon, the sun had softened, and the departure gate glowed in golden light. Families hugged goodbye, business travelers typed frantically on laptops, and children pressed their faces against windows to watch planes take off. Life had moved on, as it always does. The incident was just one more story in a sea of stories. But for Karen, it was a story, the one that defined her, the one that humbled her. As the tow truck disappeared behind the gates of the impound lot, the final image of her crushed SUV sealed the chapter. The airport had delivered its lesson loud and clear. No one, not even the loudest, most demanding voice, was above the rules. The world didn't bend for one person's arrogance. It carried on, and it always would. For Karen, this was the end of her illusion of control. For everyone else, it was a reminder, a spectacle that reinforced something simple but powerful. Entitlement has no place in a world built on order, fairness, and respect. Rules exist for a reason, and the consequences of breaking them come sooner or later, sometimes louder and more crushing than you ever imagined. And as the last flight of the day roared into the sky, the story of the woman who parked her car at the departure gate and lost everything in broad daylight, it became a cautionary tale that would live on in airport lore for years to come.